September 17th, 1945. The morning sun over Fort Robinson, Nebraska, came up slowly, as if unsure whether the war was truly over. The plains stretched in every direction, gold, silent, endless, and along the dusty road leading to the camp's northern compound, a column of German prisoners of war walked back from morning roll call in an order that no guard bothered to enforce anymore. The war had ended 4 months earlier, yet their lives were suspended in a strange quiet where the world outside the wire moved forward while theirs did not. Most of them didn't speak as they moved, but the expressions on their faces said everything: uncertainty, fear, and a growing sense of something dangerous and unspoken. They didn't want to go home. Gefreiter Otto Lange, 24, tall, blond, and once fiercely loyal to the Wehrmacht, clutched a worn cigarette between 2 fingers as he walked. He had learned to smoke only after being captured, taught by an American sergeant from Kentucky, who said, "Relax, kid, war's over. Might as well act like it." Otto didn't understand America, not in any real way, but the camp had become a world with its own rules. He'd seen things here that would have been unimaginable back in Germany: guards handing out second helpings of stew, farmers waving at trucks of POW labourers, American children staring at them with curiosity, not hatred. It was as if being the enemy didn't mean being less than human. When Otto reached the barracks, his friend Friedrich Fritz Baumann was already sitting on the steps, polishing a pair of American-issue work boots he had been allowed to keep. Fritz was 31, a former baker from Cologne, and carried a quiet sadness everywhere he went. The news he received 2 weeks earlier still clung to him like smoke. His wife had died in the bombings. His bakery was gone. His home no longer existed in any recognizable form. "Didn't sleep again?" Otto asked softly. Fritz shrugged. "What is there to wake up for? At least here." He stopped, stared down at the leather he was polishing. "At least here, it is quiet." That was the growing truth no one dared speak aloud. In the American camps, Nebraska, Iowa, Texas, Georgia, German prisoners were discovering something profoundly unsettling. The war was over, but returning home meant facing ruins, hunger, revenge, and a Germany they no longer recognized. Here, behind the wire, they were fed, given work, treated with decency, even paid in camp coupons. Here, they were safe. And safety was a rare thing in 1945. That morning, an American truck rattled into the compound, raising a cloud of dust as it braked hard near the administrative hut. Lieutenant Raymond Porter jumped down, waving a folded telegram. The guards didn't seem surprised. Telegrams had been arriving almost daily, delivering updated transfer orders, release schedules, repatriation lists. But this message carried a tone none of them had heard before. Word spread quickly. More prisoners were being repatriated, and soon. The camps were clearing out faster than anyone expected. Inside Barracks 12, a murmur passed through the men like a shiver. Some cheered. Others sat in stunned silence. A few broke down crying. Otto felt something he didn't expect, a hollow ache, somewhere between dread and disbelief. He had spent 2 years dreaming of going home, but now that the moment was approaching, he felt terrified. The first time he realized why was 6 months earlier, during a labor detail on an orchard outside the camp. The American farmer, a tall man with sunburned cheeks, had offered the POWs water and fresh peaches. Otto still remembered the shock, a farmer offering food to prisoners he had never met. In Germany, no one had shared anything for years. Hunger had turned neighbors into strangers, strangers into threats. But here, even the land felt generous. As the September day warmed over Nebraska, a captain named William Briggs assembled the first group scheduled for repatriation. He had spent much of his adult life in the army, fought in North Africa and Italy, and now oversaw hundreds of German POWs he had once faced in battle. He watched them gather, some excited, some trembling, some refusing to meet his eyes. You'll be taken to New York, then by ship to Bremerhaven, Briggs explained. From there, the German authorities will process your papers and assist with relocation as best they can. Relocation, Otto whispered under his breath, as if anyone has a home left. Fritz didn't move. He stared at the ground, unmoving, like a man hoping if he stayed still enough, he'd be forgotten. One of the guards, Corporal Simmons, approached him gently. You on the list, Baumann? Fritz lifted his head, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. No, he said quickly. Too quickly. Simmons frowned. Supposed to be. Check again. No, Fritz insisted, standing abruptly, voice cracking. No, I can't. I can't go back. A few men turned, startled. In months of captivity, Fritz had never raised his voice. Now it burst from him like something breaking loose. Simmons looked uncomfortable. It ain't up to me, Fritz. Orders are orders. Fritz's hands shook uncontrollably. Otto stood beside him, gripping his arm. Fritz had nothing to return to, nothing, and he wasn't alone. Half the camp was living with the same fear. By mid-afternoon, the men selected for repatriation boarded the trucks. Dust swirled around them as engines roared to life. Some waved goodbye. Others stared ahead, stiff and pale. Otto felt his throat tighten. The trucks rolled out, leaving the camp strangely hollow, an emptiness the men couldn't explain. The sound of engines faded into the distance, and with it went the illusion that time had stopped. The war had ended. Their stay in America had not. That night, as Otto lay awake staring at the wooden beams above his bunk, he whispered the thought that had been building for weeks, words he dared not speak even to Fritz. I don't want to leave, he confessed into the dark. Not like this. Not now. Outside, the prairie wind moved softly through the camp's fences. And somewhere in the quiet, he knew thousands of German POWs across America were feeling the same thing. They didn't want to go home. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The days that followed the first wave of repatriations changed the atmosphere of Fort Robinson completely. The compound felt thinner, quieter, as if the absence of the departed men had hollowed out the space they once filled. It wasn't just fewer voices in the mess hall or fewer boots on the gravel during morning roll call. It was the look on the faces of those who remained. For the first time since arriving in America, they felt afraid. On the morning of September 22nd, Otto walked into the dining hall and found that the long wooden tables, usually jammed with noise and elbows and laughter, echoed with empty seats. The kitchen staff ladled out oatmeal and biscuits, as they always did, but even the American cooks sensed the shift. One of them, a round-faced woman named Clara, who had volunteered with the USO, whispered to a guard, "They look like they've lost someone." The guard glanced at the POWs and whispered back, "They have." Fritz took his seat beside Otto, but he barely touched his food. He had grown thinner over the last weeks, not from lack of meals, but lack of appetite. He kept his eyes lowered, fork unmoving. Otto pushed a roll toward him. "You need to eat," he murmured. Fritz shook his head. "I need to think." He didn't elaborate. But Otto already knew what that meant. Fritz wasn't thinking about Germany. He was thinking about how to stay in America. Rumours spread fast in POW camps, and by the end of September, a new one had taken hold. Men who worked well and caused no trouble were being secretly offered temporary contracts on American farms. That wasn't exactly true. The Geneva Convention forbade keeping POWs after the end of hostilities, and the US Army knew it. Everyone knew it. But desperation made men cling to small, impossible hopes. The truth was simpler. American farmers were begging the government, "Don't send them home yet. Harvest season will collapse without them." Many POWs had become essential labor. They weren't just prisoners. They were workers the rural economy now depended on. The tension worsened when a military official named Colonel Davenport arrived for a full inspection. He was tall, bone-thin, and had a clipped way of speaking that suggested he tolerated no deviation from orders. Davenport gathered all company commanders in the administrative building. Guards who lingered near the door heard fragments of the briefing. All camps must be cleared. No exceptions. Repatriation quotas doubled. By the next morning, a new list was posted outside the mess hall. Another 140 men were to be shipped out by the end of the week. Fritz's name was on it. When he saw it, he stopped breathing. Otto grabbed his arm, feeling the tremor in his friend's fingers. "There must be some mistake," Otto said, though he knew there wasn't. The lists were final. They came from Washington. Arguing meant nothing. Fritz swallowed hard. "If I go back, Otto, I have no one. Nothing. Cologne is—" His voice cracked. "It's gone." He wasn't exaggerating. Some POWs had received photographs, cities twisted into ruins, streets ripped open like wounds. Fritz's last letter from his brother described Cologne as a field of bricks, dust, and ghosts. That afternoon, Fritz walked to the camp's edge, where the double-layered fence stood quiet in the sunlight. Beyond it lay the Nebraska prairie, wild, open, untouched. He stared at it the way a drowning man might stare at a distant shore. An American guard named Simmons approached slowly. "You all right, Fritz?" Fritz nodded, but his eyes were distant. Simmons sighed. "I heard you're on the next transport." Fritz didn't respond. "You know," Simmons said hesitantly, "my family's farm is only 30 miles from here. My father still talks about the German boy who helped repair the barn last spring. Said he never worked with anyone so quick with tools." Fritz blinked. "You mean Dietrich?" "Yeah, kid had talent." Simmons rubbed the back of his neck. "Dad's been telling me for weeks he wishes they'd let a few of you stay." Fritz's shoulders sagged. "Wishing doesn't change orders." Simmons exhaled. "No, it doesn't." Back in the barracks, Otto sat with a small group of POWs who were all facing repatriation. They weren't troublemakers or ideologues. They were farmers, bakers, mechanics, carpenters, men whose homes were rubble. Men who had tasted something in America they didn't know existed anymore: stability. "We could ask to appeal the assignment," one man suggested. "They won't allow it." "Maybe we tell them we're afraid for our lives in Germany," another asked. "They already know." Otto listened quietly, studying the despair around him. These men weren't defying orders. They were begging for time to figure out a future that didn't leave them homeless, starved, or beaten in the streets of their own country. That evening, a rare event occurred. The camp commander, Captain Briggs, visited Barracks 12 in person. He stood at the entrance, hat under his arm, looking unusually somber. "I heard about the reaction to the new lists," he said gently. "And I know this isn't easy. Some of you don't want to go home. Some of you have nothing left there. I understand that. Believe me, I do." Fritz raised his head slowly, eyes tired, but burning with something raw. "Then why send us?" Briggs hesitated. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight the men weren't used to hearing. "Because the world doesn't know what peace looks like yet. And someone, somewhere, decided this was the way to start again." The barracks was silent, not out of anger, out of helplessness. Briggs continued, "But I want you to know something. Every guard in this camp respects you. Every farmer who worked with you respects you. And when you go home, you won't be alone. We are sending supplies with you. Food, blankets, even tools. It's not much, but it's what we can do." For the first time all day, Fritz's expression shifted, still grief, but mixed with a fragile, flickering gratitude. When Briggs left, the men sat quietly in the dim lamp glow, listening to the wind brushing against the barracks walls. Otto looked at Fritz and saw something tighten inside him, resolve maybe, or the beginning of resignation. Later that night, Fritz whispered into the dark, "America is the first place I felt like a person again." Otto didn't know what to say, because he felt the same. Outside, the prairie stretched into the distance, endless and indifferent. Yet to the men behind the wire, it represented the one thing their shattered homeland no longer could. possibility. And that was why so many of them, thousands across the United States, were beginning to whisper the same desperate truth. They didn't want to go back, not to the ruins, not to the hunger, not to the vengeance that waited for them on the other side of the ocean. They wanted to stay. But the trucks would come, and the ships would sail, Jim. And time, no matter how much they pleaded, would not stop. October arrived with a cold wind that swept across the Nebraska plains, rattling loose boards on the barracks and sending dry leaves tumbling across the yard. The mornings grew sharper, the evenings darker, and with each passing day, the remaining German POWs felt the walls of time closing in. No one knew exactly when the next convoy of trucks would arrive, but everyone understood it was soon. The war was over, but their uncertainty was not. On the evening of October the 4th, Otto and Fritz joined a Labour detail escort to a nearby farm, the land of a man named Henry Whitaker, a 58-year-old farmer who had lost 2 sons in the Pacific, but somehow never allowed grief to harden into hatred. Whitaker treated the German POWs the way he treated any hired help, firm, fair, and with enough warmth to soften the edges of long days. To the men, his farm had become a kind of quiet refuge, a place where the war faded for a few hours. That evening, they helped repair a storm-damaged fence along the southern field. Whitaker worked alongside them, hammering nails and testing posts with the deliberate strength of a man who had spent his life shaping stubborn land. "You boys hear the news?" he asked casually as he straightened a section of wire. "They're saying most of you will be gone by the end of the month." The hammers slowed. Otto swallowed hard. Fritz looked away. Whitaker noticed. "You don't want to go back, do you?" No one answered, but their silence spoke plainly. Whitaker leaned against a fence post, rubbing his palms together. "My wife asked me last night if we could write to the government, see if we might keep a few of the boys on for the winter. I told her we could try, but it won't change anything." Otto tightened the wire and murmured, "Why would you want us to stay?" Whitaker shrugged. "Because you work hard, because you're respectful, because you've been through hell and still act like decent men, and because," he sighed deeply, "because I don't see enemies anymore. I see young fellows who deserve a chance." Fritz's eyes glistened. "In Germany, I have no chance." Whitaker nodded, jaw tightening with sympathy, but also helplessness. "I know, that's the worst part." When the detail returned to camp that night, Fritz walked with a strange stillness. Not numbness, something deeper. Acceptance of what he couldn't control. At the barracks door, he paused and looked out over the compound, lit faintly by lantern light. "Tell me truthfully," he said to Otto. "When you imagine home, what do you see?" Otto opened his mouth, but no words came. He saw ruins. He saw hunger. He saw uncertainty so wide it felt like an abyss. The image of his childhood street, a place of bicycles, bakeries, and laughing neighbours, had been replaced by charred timber and broken stone. "I don't know," he finally whispered. Fritz nodded. "That is why I am afraid." The next morning, October 5th, the trucks arrived. Dust spiraled up from the road as the convoy rolled into the yard, engines droning like something inevitable. Men stepped outside barracks, squinting into the glare, hearts pounding. A silence spread through the camp, the kind that comes before a storm. Captain Briggs and Colonel Davenport stood side by side, though their expressions could not have been more different. Briggs looked heavy with sadness. Davenport looked like a man fulfilling an unpleasant but necessary duty. Names were called. One by one, men stepped forward. Some moved with stiff resignation, some trembled. A few ran hands along the barracks doorframes, as if memorizing the texture of a place they would never see again. When Fritz's name echoed across the yard, he closed his eyes briefly, breathed in, and stepped forward. Otto walked beside him without speaking. The guards did not intervene. Everyone in the camp knew how deep the bond between the two men had grown. As Fritz reached the line of men boarding the trucks, Simmons approached him. "You take care of yourself," the guard said, voice thick. "If you need to write anyone, write me. I'll answer." Fritz managed a small, broken smile. "Thank you. For everything." He climbed onto the truck bed, turned once, and met Otto's eyes. It was not a look of despair. It was a look of someone trying to carry courage into the unknown. The truck lurched forward. As it moved across the compound, other POWs began something unexpected. One man raised his hand in a gesture of farewell, but then another did, and another, until dozens of German prisoners stood with arms raised, offering silent salute to those departing. It was not military. It was human. Otto felt something fracture inside him as he watched the convoy rumble toward the gate. Dust swallowed the trucks one by one. When the last one passed beyond sight, the camp felt unbearably quiet. That night, unable to sleep, Otto walked to the fence. Beyond it, the prairie stretched under a sky full of stars, wide, calm, indifferent to human suffering. The wind carried the faint scent of cut hay and distant wood smoke. America smelled alive. Germany, as he remembered it last, smelled of ash. He pressed a hand against the cold wire. The knowledge settled in him like a stone. Soon, he would be gone too. Days passed. More names were posted. More trucks departed. The camp shrank like a dimming world. On October 23rd, Otto's own name appeared on the list. He felt the jolt in his stomach, the sudden shortness of breath, the same dread Fritz had felt. He stared at the paper until the letters blurred. A guard touched his shoulder gently. "It'll be all right, Otto." But both men knew that was a kindness, not a truth. On the morning he departed, Otto walked slowly through the barracks for the last time. He touched the edge of his bunk, the rough wood of the table, the window where he and Fritz once sat sharing cigarettes, watching thunderstorms roll over the prairie. The details etched themselves into him like memories of another life. When he climbed onto the truck, he gripped the railing and held it tightly. As the engine roared to life, he looked back at the camp, the place where he had learned English, learned how to laugh again, learned that respect did not have a nationality. The place where, for the first time in years, he had felt like a human being. The truck rolled forward, the gates swung open, and America slipped away behind him. Weeks later, when Otto stepped off the ship in Bremerhaven, the cold German wind hit him hard. The port was a landscape of ruins. Children with hollow cheeks rummaged through rubble. Women filtered dirty water through cloth. Men stared with exhausted, hollow eyes. Otto felt something collapse inside him. He finally understood why thousands of German POWs had begged, quietly, desperately, to be allowed to stay in America. Because America had fed them, given them dignity, given them work and routine and stability, given them a place where the war's bitterness melted into something almost like peace. Germany gave them only devastation. As Otto walked into the ruins of his homeland, he whispered words he didn't dare say aloud while still in captivity. "I wish I could have stayed." And he was not alone. Across Germany, tens of thousands of repatriated POWs felt the same crushing realization. The safest place they had ever known was the country they had once been sent to fight. The war was over, but its strangest truth remained: that thousands of German POWs did not want to return home. They had wanted to remain in America, the one place where, after all the destruction, they had finally felt human again.